I remember the smell of fresh laundry on the line and the sound of my mother humming in the kitchen. I was only 14, just a child really, but like many girls my age back then, I thought I already knew so much about life. We grew up fast in those days. There wasn't time to be soft or confused or curious, at least not openly. You did what you were told. You didn't ask questions. You didn't talk back. And above all, you didn't bring shame to the family. But I had questions. I had feelings. I had dreams. And I had no one to talk to. My father was a man of few words, but when he spoke, you listened. He was proud, hard-working, and deeply rooted in what he believed was right. There was no middle ground with him. You were either obedient or you were a disappointment. And Lord help you if you were a girl and you stepped out of line. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, or at least thought they did. I was a good student, quiet, respectful. I helped my mom with the younger kids and never caused trouble. But inside, I was lonely. I wanted someone to see me, not as a daughter or a sister, not as a helper, but as me, just me. And then, I met him. He was 2 years older, with a smile that made my heart stutter. He didn't go to my school. He worked at the gas station near the edge of town. I used to walk past it on my way to the grocery store. The first time he spoke to me, I felt like the sky opened. He said I was pretty. No one had ever said that to me before. Not even my father, especially not him. We started talking at first, just hellos and small smiles. Then, longer conversations, hidden glances, quick touches. It felt like a secret just for us, like something beautiful growing in a quiet corner of my world. He made me feel grown up, special. I didn't know how to explain it, even to myself. Looking back, I realize how young I truly was, how vulnerable, how much I needed guidance and didn't have it. One evening, we stayed out too late. He told me he loved me. He kissed me like I mattered. And in that moment, I believed every word. I thought love meant trust. I thought love meant giving yourself to someone. I didn't understand the consequences. Weeks later, my body started changing. I felt sick in the mornings. My clothes didn't fit right. I didn't bleed that month, or the next, and I knew. Deep inside, I knew, but I didn't want it to be true. I was terrified. How could I explain something I barely understood myself? I didn't even know how to say the words "I'm pregnant" out loud. I didn't know how to face my father. I didn't know what would happen to me, or to the child inside me at night. I would cry silently into my pillow, praying to God that this was all just a mistake, that I would wake up and everything would go back to normal. But each morning, reality settled deeper into my bones. I finally told my mother first. She gasped, covered her mouth, and whispered, "Oh no." She looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. I saw fear in her eyes, not comfort. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just said, "Your father will have to know." That moment changed my life forever. His name was Daniel. He wasn't the type of boy my parents would have approved of, not that I ever got the chance to find out. But to me, he seemed like a breath of fresh air in a world that always felt too quiet, too small, too suffocating. He was 17, worked full-time at the gas station on the edge of town, and had this way of smiling like he knew things about the world that no one else did. I was mesmerized. The first time I saw him, I was walking home from the grocery store with a bag of sugar and flour in my arms. It was hot, the kind of southern summer heat that makes the road shimmer. I was sweating, tired, and probably frowning. And then I heard him call out, "Need a hand?" I looked up and there he was, standing in the shade near one of the pumps, wiping his hands on a rag. His hair was dark and wavy, and he had a smudge of oil on his cheek. He grinned at me, and for a second, I forgot how heavy the bag was. I just stared at him, then shook my head quickly. "No, thank you," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "All right," he said, still smiling. "Just trying to be a gentleman." I don't know what it was about him, but from that moment on, I felt pulled to that gas station like a magnet. I started offering to run errands more often. I'd walk the long way just to pass by and hope he was outside. Sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't. But when he was, we'd exchange a few words. Small talk at first, then jokes, little teases. He'd say things like, "You walk by here just to see me, don't you?" And I'd roll my eyes, but my cheeks would burn. I was 14, barely a teenager, and I thought I was falling in love. Daniel made me feel like I mattered. At home, I was just the oldest girl. My job was to help, to stay quiet, to be useful. No one asked how I felt or what I wanted. But Daniel asked. He asked about school, about books I liked, about the music I listened to. He listened to me like my words had weight, like they were worth something. And I, foolish and lonely as I was, mistook attention for affection and kindness for love. It didn't take long for things to escalate. He started waiting for me after my errands, walking with me down the back path, where no one would see us. He held my hand one afternoon, and I thought my heart would beat right out of my chest. He kissed me a week later, and I floated home in a haze, convinced that this must be what love feels like. He told me I was beautiful, that I was mature for my age, that he'd never met anyone like me. Looking back now, I see all the red flags, the way he made me feel special only when it was convenient, the way he asked me to keep things between us, the way he avoided the word girlfriend. But back then, I didn't know what manipulation looked like. I just knew I craved the warmth of his words. He convinced me that what we had was real, that age was just a number, that no one else would understand. I believed him, because I wanted to, because I needed to, because I was 14 and desperate to be loved. One night, after walking me home and stealing kisses beneath the oak tree out back, things went further than they ever had. I remember every detail, the trembling in my fingers, the fear and excitement swirling in my chest, the way he whispered that he loved me. I didn't know what I was doing. I just didn't want to lose him. I wish I could go back and hold that girl, me, and tell her to wait, to run, to see herself as more than what his attention made her feel. But I can't. In the days and weeks that followed, Daniel started pulling away. He didn't wait for me outside the store. He wasn't around when I passed by. When I finally saw him again, he said he was busy with work, with life, with stuff. I nodded, pretending to understand. But something inside me was already breaking. I was so focused on missing him that I didn't notice the changes in my body right away. I was tired all the time. My appetite was strange. And then, my period didn't come, not once, not twice. That's when the panic set in. I tried to find Daniel, to tell him, but by then he was barely acknowledging me. He said things like, "Are you sure it's mine? And you need to figure that out." And just like that, I was alone again. More alone than I had ever been. I hadn't just lost a boy. I had lost my innocence, my sense of safety, my belief that people meant what they said. Daniel disappeared from my life not long after. I don't know where he went. He never met our child, never called, never wrote. But even now, all these years later, I sometimes wonder if he ever thinks about me, if he ever regrets what he did or what he didn't do. What I do know is this: that meeting changed my life forever, and not in the way I had dreamed. I'll never forget the moment I knew. I was standing in the kitchen, helping my mama peel potatoes. The afternoon light poured in through the window, and the smell of stew filled the air. It was an ordinary day, like any other, until I felt a sudden wave of nausea rise from my stomach. I dropped the peeler and rushed to the sink, barely making it in time. Mama looked at me, startled. "You all right?" she asked, wiping her hands. I think I'm just tired," I said, my voice shaking. But inside, I already knew it wasn't just fatigue. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my hands resting on my belly. It was flat, still the same as always, but it didn't feel the same anymore. Something had shifted, something invisible, but real, a tiny life, growing inside me. I whispered the word to myself, pregnant. It sounded foreign, heavy, terrifying. 14. I barely understood what was happening to my body, let alone what it meant for my future. I had heard girls at school whisper about getting in trouble, but I never imagined I'd be one of them. And yet, here I was, a child carrying another child. For a few days, I convinced myself it could be something else. Maybe I was sick. Maybe it would pass. But the weeks went on, and the signs only became clearer. No period. Nausea. Exhaustion. I started avoiding my siblings, staying quiet at dinner, keeping to myself. I felt like a ghost in my own home. I thought about telling Daniel. Maybe he'd step up. Maybe he'd help me figure it out. But when I finally gathered the courage and found him behind the gas station, his face told me everything I needed to know. "You're what?" he said, eyes wide. "I'm late," I whispered, "and sick. I think I'm pregnant." He ran a hand through his hair, backing away. "Are you sure it's mine?" My heart broke right there on the gravel. "There's no one else. I said, tears brimming. He looked at me like I was a problem, a burden. You've got to figure this out, he said, then walked off. I never saw him again after that. I walked home in a daze. My world, the little piece of security I had left, collapsed in a single conversation. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't cry. I just went numb. The next few days, I lived in fear. My body felt like a traitor, changing in ways I couldn't control. My breasts were sore. My stomach ached. Every smell made me sick. I still tried to do my chores, tried to smile when spoken to, but the weight of my secret was suffocating. I knew I had to tell someone. I couldn't hide it forever. So one night, I went to my mother. She was folding laundry in the bedroom, humming the same tune she always did. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding. "Mama," I said. She looked up. "I need to talk to you." Something in my voice must have told her this wasn't about chores or school. She sat down slowly, her expression changing. "What is it, baby?" "I think I'm pregnant," I whispered, barely able to form the words. Her face drained of color. "What?" I nodded, tears falling freely now. "I missed 2 periods. I'm sick every morning." "I didn't mean to, Mama. I didn't know." She stood abruptly, her hands covering her mouth. For a moment, she just stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Then she said the words that still echo in my heart. "We have to tell your father." Those 7 words struck like thunder. My daddy was a proud man, a strict man. I had never seen him cry, never heard him admit weakness. He believed in rules, in discipline, in respect. I had broken every one of those without even trying. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards made my stomach twist. I imagined him, yelling, disowning me, even hitting me. I had no idea what would happen, only that it would be bad. The next morning, Mama told him. She didn't give me a chance to explain. She said it quietly at the kitchen table, her eyes on the floor. I stood there, frozen, waiting. He looked at me, not like a father looks at his daughter, but like a man looking at something shameful. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice cold. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. "You've ruined everything," he continued. "You embarrassed this family. I raised you better than this." I shook my head, sobbing. "Daddy, I didn't mean." He stood up so quickly, his chair scraped the floor. "You're just like your aunt, just like her." Weak. That moment, I felt like I disappeared. He didn't ask who the boy was. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't even ask if it was true. He just blamed me. A 14-year-old girl who didn't know what she was doing, who had been looking for love in all the wrong places, who now had to carry a life while being crushed by shame. I wanted to vanish, but I didn't. I stood there, trembling and alone, holding my belly and wondering how I would ever make it through the next day, let alone the rest of my life. That moment was the beginning of everything, the end of who I had been, and the start of someone I never thought I'd become. I don't think anything truly prepares you for the moment your own father looks at you with disgust. Not disappointment, not worry, disgust. When I told you earlier that my daddy was a strict man, I meant it. But even in his hardest moments, I used to think that deep down, he loved us, loved me, that beneath the coldness, the long silences, the rigid rules, there was a protective instinct, something unspoken but still there. But the day he found out I was pregnant, I realized I had been wrong. After Mama told him, I stood frozen in the corner of the kitchen. My hands were shaking so hard I had to clasp them behind my back, just to keep still. He stared at me for what felt like hours, his face pale, his eyes narrow and dark. "I didn't raise a slut," he said. That word, I had never heard it spoken in my home before. Not like that, not directed at me. The sound of it hit me like a slap. I flinched, but I didn't speak. I couldn't. "You're just like your aunt," he muttered. "She ran off and had a bastard too." Mama tried to say something then. I don't even remember what, but he raised his hand, not to hit her, but in that way men do when they want silence. And it worked. We both fell quiet. Then he turned to me again. "You brought shame into this house. You've ruined your name. You'll never be right again." I wanted to scream, to fall to my knees, to beg him to look at me, really look at me, and see the girl who was scared, lost, confused. I wanted him to ask me if I was okay. I wanted to hear, "We'll figure this out together." But that never came. Instead, he left the room. Didn't say another word. He slammed the door behind him, and I heard the engine of his truck roar to life. He didn't come back that night, and for a long time, I wished he wouldn't. Mama didn't speak much after that either. She went about her chores in silence, barely looking me in the eyes. It was like I had become invisible, a ghost in my own home. The once chatty kitchen, full of laughter and conversation, became a cold, quiet place where my presence brought only shame. The next Sunday, we didn't go to church. My father said we were staying in. I knew it was because he didn't want the others to see me. My belly wasn't even showing yet, but in his eyes, the sin already was. He wouldn't allow the neighbors to whisper. Not about his daughter. Not about him. So we stayed home, week after week. He told my siblings I was sick, that I had female problems. They were too young to understand, and I was too broken to explain. School was out for the summer, but when fall came, I wasn't allowed to return. We won't have them talking, he said. You've lost that privilege. That was the word he used. Privilege. As if education was something to be earned only by the pure, the perfect. I spent most of my days sitting in my room, staring out the window, wondering what would happen to me, what would happen to the baby. I started talking to it in my head, not because I was crazy, but because it was the only one who would listen. I'd say things like, I don't know if you're a boy or a girl, but I hope you never feel unloved. I hope you never have to hear the things I've heard. I hope you never have to hide who you are. My siblings weren't allowed to visit me unsupervised. My dad said I'd be a bad influence. I was 14, pregnant, and now officially a danger to my own brothers and sisters. The isolation cut deeper than the words. I started to believe what he said, that I had ruined everything, that I didn't deserve a future, that I was dirty, shameful, that no one would ever want me again, not as a daughter, a wife, or even a mother. And yet, somehow, every morning I woke up and kept going. I don't know how. Maybe it was for the baby, maybe it was just stubbornness, or maybe it was hope, the last flickering light in a soul too young to be this bruised. But I do remember one specific moment, late at night, when I heard my father's voice through the door. He didn't know I was awake. He was talking to Mama in the kitchen. She's not my daughter anymore, he said. She's someone else now. And that hurt more than anything else. Because it told me what I had feared the most, that I wasn't just carrying shame, I had become it. That night, I cried into my pillow until I couldn't breathe, not just because I was hurt, but because I still loved him, even after everything. And that love, unreturned and unspoken, became one of the greatest wounds I would carry for the rest of my life. Shame doesn't just happen all at once. It creeps in. It clings to your skin like a cold mist, settling over you day after day until you no longer remember what it felt like to live without it. After my father turned his back on me, the rest of the world followed suit. Word got out quickly. It always did, in a small town like ours. I don't know how, but somehow, someone told someone else, and within days, I could feel the whispers floating around me like smoke. No one said anything to my face, but they didn't have to. Their eyes did the talking. Mrs. Carter, the woman who used to bake pies for us every Sunday after church, suddenly didn't wave when she passed our house. Mr. Harlan, the grocer, who always gave me an extra piece of candy when I was little, now barely looked at me when Mama sent me to pick up flour. I remember standing in line at the corner store and hearing a woman behind me say, "Such a shame. She seemed like a nice girl." I pretended not to hear, but my ears burned. That word shame became the background noise of my life. I wasn't just carrying a child. I was carrying the weight of every unspoken judgment, every lowered gaze, every silent rejection. And the worst part, I started to believe I deserved it. I began to walk with my head down. I avoided mirrors. I wore baggy clothes to hide my growing belly, even when the heat of summer turned unbearable. I didn't want people to see me, not just because of what they'd think, but because of how much it hurt to know they already had. Mama did her best to keep the household running, but something in her changed too. She wasn't cruel, but she became distant, cold. She stopped brushing my hair in the mornings like she used to. She stopped asking if I was hungry. She stopped laughing at my silly jokes. It was like she couldn't look at me without seeing her own failure. "You've got to be strong now," she'd say in a flat voice. "No one's going to help you, so you have to help yourself." I knew what she meant. We were on our own. The church, the place that was supposed to be a refuge, a home for the broken, became a source of humiliation. When we returned after several weeks, the preacher barely nodded in my direction. People moved to different pews. They didn't shake my hand during greetings. I was no longer welcome in the youth group. They never said it outright, but their silence spoke volumes. I remember walking home that Sunday, the air heavy and humid, my dress sticking to my back. I turned to my mama and said, "Why did we even go?" She didn't answer, just kept walking. I think she was embarrassed to dot at home. The silence continued. My siblings avoided me. My father spoke only when necessary, and even then, it was short, clipped commands. Take the trash, don't sit there, wash the dishes. I didn't know how to carry myself in that house anymore. I was a stranger in the place. I'd grown up. I no longer felt like a daughter, or a sister, or anything at all. The nights were the hardest. When the house was quiet, and I could finally feel the small stirrings inside my belly, my baby was growing. A life was forming inside me, despite all the shame wrapped around us. And in those quiet moments, when no one was watching, I'd place my hands over my stomach and whisper, "You are not a mistake. You are not shame. You are love." That was the only comfort I had. But still, the shame lingered. It was in every glance from an old friend who no longer spoke to me. It was in every invitation I didn't get. It was in the way people lowered their voices when I entered a room. I was 14 and already labeled, not by who I was, but by what I had done. No one asked if I was okay. No one asked if I needed anything. No one offered to talk, to listen, to help. It was like I had been erased from the good girl list and added to some unspoken register of the fallen. And yet, day after day, I endured it. I learned how to breathe through the judgment. I learned how to smile, just barely, even when I felt like crying. I learned how to hold my head up even when it felt like the whole town wanted me to bow it. But make no mistake, that shame didn't come from within me. It was handed to me. It was taught. It was pushed onto my shoulders by a society that would rather blame a young girl than ask hard questions about the world around her. And that's something I've never forgotten. Because no girl, no matter how young, how naive, how lost, deserves to carry shame for something she didn't understand, didn't ask for, and had to survive alone. Asterisk, I turned 15 2 weeks before my daughter was born. There was no birthday cake, no candles, no hugs or celebration, just a quiet morning, a bowl of oatmeal, and my mother placing a folded bundle of baby clothes on the edge of my bed. They were hand-me-downs from a neighbor who had heard about my situation. She didn't say it with kindness, she said. It lacked pity wrapped in politeness. I thanked Mama softly, even though she didn't look at me. By then, I was no longer a child in anyone's eyes. Not because I had grown, but because I was expected to be something else, a mother. A word so big and heavy that even now, all these years later, I still remember how it felt pressing against my chest. I didn't know how to be a mother. How could I? I was still trying to figure out who I was. I hadn't even finished 8th grade. I still liked drawing in my notebooks and singing in the bath when no one was home. But none of that mattered anymore. I was about to bring life into the world, and no one was going to hold my hand through it. The day I went into labor was gray and humid. I woke up before sunrise with a pain I had never felt before. Sharp, low, constant. I called out for Mama, and she came rushing in, took one look at me, and nodded. "It's time," she said. She didn't panic. She didn't smile. She just moved with the quiet certainty of a woman who had done this before. Daddy didn't say a word. He drove us to the hospital and waited in the hallway. I remember lying there in that cold room, the smell of antiseptic in the air, nurses moving around like shadows, voices distant. I gripped the sides of the bed and tried not to scream. I was afraid to be loud, afraid that if I cried, someone would tell me I was weak or worse. Unfit. That it hurt more than I can describe. My body felt like it was being torn apart, and I had no one to squeeze my hand, no one to whisper that it would be okay. The nurse was kind, but she wasn't family. And family, well, family was absent. After hours of pain and silence, my daughter was born. They wrapped her in a blanket and placed her in my arms. She was tiny, pink, and crying, her little fists curled up against her cheeks. I looked at her and couldn't believe she had come from me. She was mine, not just the product of a mistake, not just the result of a decision I barely understood. She was a person, a life, a soul. And suddenly, in the middle of all that pain and fear, I felt something powerful. Love. Raw, fierce, protective, overwhelming. I didn't know how I would feed her. I didn't know how to change diapers or calm her when she cried. I didn't even know what she needed, let alone what I needed. But I knew one thing: I would never let her feel the shame I had felt. When we got home from the hospital, the house was quiet. My father didn't greet us. My siblings peeked around corners, curious but afraid. My daughter cried that first night, and I held her close, rocking in the dark, humming softly even though my throat was dry and sore. The next morning, I was up before the sun, trying to figure out how to nurse her, how to hold her, how to soothe her tiny whimpers. I was exhausted. My back ached. My chest was tender, but I kept going, because she needed me, and I needed her. She became my world, my anchor, my reason to get out of bed each morning. I stopped caring about what the neighbors thought. I stopped listening to the whispers. My life had narrowed into one focus: keeping my daughter safe and loved. There were hard days, days when she cried nonstop, when I couldn't get her to sleep, when I had to miss meals just to stretch the food. There were nights I sat on the bathroom floor, sobbing quietly, while she finally dozed off in her crib, wondering how I'd make it another day. But there were also moments of joy. The first time she smiled, the first time she grabbed my finger with her whole hand, the way her tiny body fit perfectly against my chest when I held her close. She never judged me. She never asked why we didn't have much. She never looked at me with the disappointment I had grown used to. All she wanted was love. All she needed was me. And slowly, day by day, I realized something. Maybe I couldn't erase the past. Maybe I couldn't undo the choices or the pain, but I could choose what came next. I chose to be her mother, not just in name, but in spirit. I chose to grow up with her, to learn, to fail, to try again. I chose to give her the life I had longed for. Becoming a mother at 15 didn't break me. It became the reason I survived. When people talk about teenage motherhood, they often focus on the baby. They ask how the child turned out. They want to know if the young mother regrets it. They wonder if she finished school, if she got married, if she ever got her life back. But no one really asks what she lost, not just in terms of dreams or opportunities, but in the quiet, invisible ways a girl disappears while the rest of the world keeps spinning. I lost time. Time that should have been spent growing, discovering, stumbling, and learning. Time for dances and school plays, for football games and late-night talks on the phone with friends. Time for finding out who I was without the burden of motherhood pressing against my back before I even learned how to stand up for myself. While girls my age were worried about what to wear to the school dance, I was washing cloth diapers by hand. While they gossiped about boys in the lunchroom, I was learning how to treat diaper rash and heat up formula without waking the baby. I wasn't envious, exactly. I had something they didn't. A child I loved with all my heart. But still, I mourned the childhood that vanished in silence. I lost my education. I never went back to school. My father wouldn't allow it. Not because there wasn't a way, but because in his eyes, my chance was gone. He used to say, "You made your bed, now lie in it." I watched the school bus drive by our house every morning and every afternoon. I used to imagine myself on it, sitting by the window, clutching books, dreaming of college. That dream faded, slowly, not all at once, but like a photograph left out in the sun. Each day, a little more of it washed away. I lost friends. Girls I used to sit with at lunch stopped coming by. Some of them were told by their parents not to associate with me. Others just drifted away, unsure of what to say. I get it now. We were all just kids, and I became something they didn't know how to handle. I went from peer to warning, a walking what not to do. It hurt, though. There were so many nights I wished I could call someone, anyone, just to talk, just to feel like I was still part of the world I used to belong to. But my phone stayed silent, and my world grew smaller. I lost my sense of safety. Once, I believed adults would protect me, that if something terrible happened, someone would step in, hold me, tell me I was still worthy of love. But after getting pregnant, I saw the truth. People don't rush to protect a girl who should have known better. They don't ask what led her there. They just point fingers and turn away. The boy who got me pregnant, he vanished. And no one ever held him accountable. No one ever asked what a 17-year-old was doing with a 14-year-old girl. No one asked if I had consented, if I understood what was happening, if I had ever been taught how to say no. It didn't matter. To them, I was the sinner, the one who should have known better. And in that judgment, I lost another part of myself, my voice. For years, I didn't speak about what happened, not fully, not truthfully. I carried the weight of blame like a second skin, afraid that if I opened my mouth, people would see just how broken I felt inside. So I stayed quiet. I did what I had to do. I survived. But survival is not the same as living. I don't regret my daughter, not for a second. She saved me. Loving her gave my life a kind of purpose that nothing else could have. But I do regret the years I lost believing I didn't deserve anything more than survival. I regret that I never got to be a teenager. I regret that I spent years shrinking myself to fit into the box people made for me. The fallen girl, the cautionary tale, the lost cause. There's a photo of me at 16, holding my baby on my hip, standing on our front porch. I'm smiling in the picture, a soft, tired smile, but my eyes are hollow. When I look at that photo now, I want to reach into it, take that girl by the hand, and say, "You are more than what they say about you. You are still allowed to dream." But no one said that to me then, so I gave up on dreams for a long time, and that might be the biggest thing I lost of all. I waited for years. I waited for him to walk into my room one day, sit on the edge of the bed, and look me in the eyes. I imagined it so many times, the way he'd clear his throat awkwardly, fold his hands, and say the words I needed more than anything else: "I'm sorry." But it never happened. My father was not a man who admitted when he was wrong. He saw apology as weakness, as an invitation for disrespect. In his world, right and wrong were black and white, and he was always standing on the side of righteousness, no matter the damage he left behind. After my daughter was born, he didn't acknowledge her for weeks. He didn't ask her name. He never held her. He treated her like she was furniture in the house, something to walk around, not something to notice. And me, I was still a shadow, still the girl who ruined his pride. He never yelled again, never called me names, but the silence hurt more than his words ever did. There's something cruel about a father who chooses to ignore his own child. It makes you question your worth in the most dangerous ways. I used to sit at the kitchen table while he read the paper, daring to clear my throat just loud enough to be heard, hoping he might glance at me, ask how I was, say something about the baby. He never did. I tried to find ways to reconnect. I brought him coffee once, just the way he liked it, black, no sugar. He took it from my hand without a word. I fixed his favorite supper on his birthday. He ate it in silence, pushed his plate away, and left the room. There were brief moments, flickers, when I thought maybe, just maybe, something had shifted. One evening, my daughter, just over a year old then, toddled into the living room, where he was reading. She waddled up and plopped down near his feet, babbling nonsense and holding out a toy. He looked down at her. For 1 second, he smiled, a small, tired smile, but then he stood up and walked away. I cried that night, not just for me, but for her, because she didn't understand that she was being rejected. But I did. I knew that look, that quiet dismissal, that inability to see someone as deserving of love, and yet, even with all the hurt, a part of me still longed for his approval. That's what no one tells you about emotional wounds from a parent. Even when they break you, you still want them to choose you. You still crave the softness they refuse to give. As I grew older and raised my daughter, I started to see just how deeply his absence, emotional, not physical, had carved into me. It made me question every decision. It made me second-guess my instincts. I parented from a place of fear that I would become like him, or that I'd drive my daughter away the same way he had driven me into silence. I vowed to be different. I told my daughter I loved her every single day. I hugged her, kissed her, listened when she talked. I let her cry when she needed to cry, and I never punished her for feeling something. I wanted her to know, without a doubt, that no mistake, no moment of weakness, could ever make her unworthy of love. The years passed. I became a woman, then a mother again, then a grandmother, and still, he never said it. We spoke, on occasion, as time wore on. Small things passed, the salt, the mail came, the dog got out. But never about what happened. Never about the way he looked at me the day I told him I was pregnant. Never about the silence that followed. Never about how I needed my father, and he turned away. He got sick in his late 70s. His body began to fail before his mind did, which gave me hope. I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe when a man sees the end of his road, he finds the courage to face the past. I sat with him in the hospital one night, just the two of us. The machines beeped softly. Rain tapped against the windows. He looked at me, really looked at me. For For the first time in what felt like decades, everything turned out all right for you? He asked, his voice thin. I stared at him, unsure how to answer. I wanted to pour out everything, the pain, the loss, the way I had built a life despite the silence he forced me to live in. But all I said was, "It did." He nodded, closed his eyes, and that was it. He passed away 2 weeks later. No apology, no reckoning, no, I'm proud of you. I think he believed his silence was strength, that if he never admitted fault, the shame would vanish. But it didn't. It lived with me for years. It lives in the spaces between fathers and daughters everywhere, who speak without words and leave wounds without touch. But I made peace with it, not because he earned it, but because I deserved it. He never apologized, but I did something even harder. I forgave him anyway. If someone had told me, back when I was 14 and pregnant, that I'd survive all of it, the shame, the silence, the judgment, I wouldn't have believed them. I thought that kind of pain was the end of me, that I'd be stuck in that shadow forever, branded by one mistake, alone in a world that didn't care what led me to it. But life has a strange way of testing you, not to see if you're strong, but to show you that you already are. I didn't feel strong when I woke up in the middle of the night to feed my baby, tears running down my face because I didn't know how to make her stop crying. I didn't feel strong when my friends disappeared, or when the church treated me like a ghost, or when I watched the school bus pass my window every morning. I didn't feel strong when I stood in line at the local clinic, holding a squirming toddler in one arm and a bag of baby bottles in the other, wondering if people were staring at me because I was too young, or because I looked too tired. But looking back now, I was strong in every single one of those moments. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't always come with confidence or big speeches. Sometimes strength is silent. It's getting up anyway. It's rocking your baby to sleep even when your arms are aching. It's cooking dinner when your heart is broken. It's facing a new day every day when part of you still feels like a child yourself. I had to grow up fast. Too fast. There were no safety nets. No one came to rescue me. But what I didn't realize then was that I was becoming the kind of woman I had needed. When I was younger, I was learning how to be fierce, how to be tender, how to be patient and tough at the same time. That kind of strength doesn't come from books or advice. It comes from living through the fire and learning how to breathe inside it. I worked small jobs when I could, babysitting, cleaning houses, helping neighbors with yard work, anything that could bring in a little money while still being there for my daughter. Eventually, I got hired at a diner on the edge of town, early mornings, long shifts, sore feet. But it felt good to do something, to build something, even if it was small. People still whispered. I could feel it. The older women from church would come in, order their coffee, and glance at me like I was the girl who never got her act together. But I held my head a little higher each day, not because I didn't care, I did, but because I couldn't let their opinion raise my child. I had to be enough for the both of us. There was one night I'll never forget. My daughter was 4 years old, and we had just come home from the library. She was obsessed with picture books, especially ones with animals that talked. She sat on the floor, flipping through pages, and suddenly looked up and said, "Mama, I'm glad you're my mommy." I froze. I had spent so long believing I was a failure, a burden, a cautionary tale, but in her eyes, I was home, I was safety, I was love. And that's when I realized I hadn't ruined my life. I had rewritten it. Sure, it didn't follow the plan I thought I wanted. There were no dances, no college dorms, no carefree summers, but there was laughter too. There was growth. There was forgiveness. There was strength, the kind of strength you don't even know is in you until life gives you no other choice. People still ask me how I did it, how I didn't give up, how I didn't run away, how I kept going. And the truth is, I didn't have a grand plan. I didn't have all the answers. I just took one step, then another, then another. Some days I crawled, some days I stumbled, but I never stopped because I had someone watching me, a little girl who needed me to show her that even in the hardest seasons, you can still bloom. That strength, it's not unique to me. It lives in every woman who's been told she's not enough, in every young mother who gets side-eyed in the grocery store, in every girl who's had to become her own hero. It's there, quiet, waiting, ready. And now, decades later, as I sit in a quiet house and watch my grandchildren play in the yard, I realize something else, that strength didn't just carry me through, it became the legacy I leave behind. Asterisk these days, when I meet a young girl, whether she's 12, 14, or 17, I see pieces of myself in her, not because she's made a mistake, not because she's headed down the same path I once walked, but because she's standing at the edge of a world that doesn't always give young girls the tools to protect themselves. And when I speak to them, I speak with all the fire, all the pain, and all the wisdom that I earned the hard way. I always start with this: you are not what happens to you. I tell them that they are not defined by what someone says about them, by the names people call them, or by the labels the world tries to stick on their skin. They are not too much. They are not enough. They are not broken. They are becoming. And that process is messy and loud and sometimes painful. But it is never shameful. Then I tell them the truth that no one told me. Love does not ask you to disappear. If a boy or a man tells you he loves you but also tells you to keep secrets, to hide things from your parents, to change who you are for his comfort, that is not love. That is control. That is danger, dressed up as romance. Love doesn't ask you to be quiet when you're hurting. It doesn't silence your instincts. And it never, ever asks you to give more than you understand. I tell them about Daniel. I tell them how he said sweet things and made me feel seen. I tell them how quickly his attention became distance, how fast he vanished when responsibility arrived. I tell them how I thought I was special, only to realize I was disposable in his world. And then I say, you deserve more than someone who only loves you when it's easy. I tell them about my father, how he turned his back on me, how he never said sorry, how he taught me the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the people who should protect you will be the first to abandon you. I don't say it to scare them. I say it so they know not to confuse authority with affection. Because, just because someone is older, or louder, or standing in a position of power, doesn't mean they're right. Then I look them in the eyes and say, you can survive anything, but you shouldn't have to survive it alone. I tell them that if they ever feel afraid, confused, unsure, they must speak. They must find one safe person, a teacher, a friend's mom, a counselor, anyone, and let the truth come out. Secrets grow heavy. They rot your spirit if you carry them too long. And silence is where shame thrives. But light, even the smallest bit, will always push the dark back. I tell young girls to trust their gut, that feeling they get when something isn't right. That's their intuition. It's the oldest, strongest part of them trying to keep them safe. I wish I had listened to mine sooner. I wish someone had told me that my instincts were worth following. And I tell them this too. You are allowed to start over every single day if you need to. Life doesn't end with one mistake. It doesn't end with one bad night or one bad decision. You are not ruined. You are not hopeless. You are not lost just because you made a wrong turn. You can choose again. You can heal. You can build a life that feels like peace, even if right now it only feels like pain. I tell them to find things that light them up: music, books, trees, animals, prayer, anything that reminds them they are still alive, still human, still worthy of joy, even in the chaos, especially in the chaos. And finally I tell them the thing I wish someone, anyone, would have said to me when I was a pregnant, terrified 14-year-old girl, sitting alone in my room, believing I had ruined my entire life. Say, you are not the shame they tried to hand you. You are still beautiful, still full of purpose. And one day, this won't be your whole story. It'll just be the beginning of your strength. And I mean it with every piece of my heart, because no matter what happens, no matter what path they find themselves on, every young girl deserves someone to stand in front of them and say, I see you, I believe you, you can still become everything you were meant to be. And if I can be that voice for even one girl, then everything I went through wasn't for nothing. It's strange, isn't it, how something that once felt like the end of your world becomes just a chapter in a story so much bigger than you imagined. I used to think I'd never recover from what happened to me, that I'd always carry the weight of that one moment, that one decision, that one pregnancy at 14 that changed everything, But today, as I sit in my quiet living room, watching the sun pour through the window, hearing the laughter of my grandchildren playing outside, I don't feel regret. I feel peace. That peace didn't come quickly. It didn't come easily. It came with time, and with tears, and with years of healing that didn't look like healing at all. It looked like survival, like working double shifts, like wiping tears in the dark so your daughter wouldn't see you cry, like choosing every day to show up, even when it felt like no one cared that you did. But I kept going. I raised a daughter who is kind, smart, fierce, and full of love. She became the kind of woman I used to dream about being. She forgave me for the mistakes I made when I was still figuring out how to be a mother and a child at the same time. She gave me grandbabies who know what unconditional love feels like because I made sure she knew it first. And now, when I look back, I no longer see a girl who ruined her life. I see a warrior. I see a young girl who stood up after being broken, who rebuilt herself with nothing but grit and grace. I see a survivor of judgment, of silence, of rejection, who turned around and gave others what she never received. I don't regret having my daughter. I don't regret the life we built, even when it was hard, even when it was lonely, because through it all, I found a strength inside me that no one could take away. Not my father, not the people who whispered, not the boy who left. I chose love. And that choice again and again saved me. Now, I want to say something to anyone watching this. To the girl who clicked on this video because the title felt a little too familiar. To the woman carrying years of shame that was never hers to hold. To the grandmother who still wonders if she did the right thing all those decades ago. You are not alone. You never were. There are thousands of us. Women who were blamed, shamed, abandoned, and silenced. Women who thought their stories were over at 14, 16, 22. Women who believed they had to shrink in order to survive. But we're still here, and we are not weak. We are not ruined. We are not what they said about us. We are the proof that you can start over, that you can raise love out of pain, that you can make something beautiful from brokenness. I look at my hands now, wrinkled, strong, aged with time. These are the hands that once held a newborn baby with shaking arms. These are the hands that scrubbed floors, packed lunches, wiped away tears, held back rage, and offered forgiveness to people who never apologized. I used to hide those hands. Now I cherish them because they tell my story, and my story, as painful as it was, is also filled with triumph, with joy, with quiet moments of grace that only I will ever understand. No, I don't regret my past because it brought me here, to this moment, to you. If this story touched your heart, if you saw even a small part of yourself in my words, I want to invite you to do something simple but powerful. Leave a comment below. Tell your story. Say how you feel. Speak your truth. You don't have to hold it in anymore. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. Subscribe if you believe in real stories, raw truth, and the strength of women who refuse to give up. And remember this, always, you are not your mistakes. You are your courage, you are your healing, and your story is still being written. Thank you for listening.